as I recuperate in the hotel room in Orlando, Florida, following a fantastic weekend at Podfest Multimedia Expo. I decided to record this episode just to review that event. So if you were in Orlando, let's dig in, let's go deep. If you weren't in Orlando this year, well, that's a huge shame. It would have been fantastic to see you, but we hope to see you next year. So that is what we're going to do today here on the Podcast Accelerator. I'm your host, Mark Asquith, CEO and co-founder of Rebel-Based Media. Now, my voice is going a little bit. My voice is getting croaky. Sam and I had done Social Media Marketing World, and then we'd done straight through to Podfest Orlando, where we were exhibiting and I was speaking. So we've spoken to 1,000 or so attendees that just sucked up every piece of information about podcasting available, which makes me smile. It's amazing. It's really good to see that, especially from where Podfest has moved from. You know, the developments over the last few years have been fantastic. So we're going to dig into Podfest in just a second. First of all, though, of course, I need to bring you up to date with the team at AWeber. I was lucky to be out there in San Diego for Social Media Marketing World with Brandon and Jenna from AWeber, and of course at Podfest with Chris Vasquez, head of product at AWeber. And they wanted me to let you know about something absolutely fantastic that they have just released over the last day or two: landing pages for your email list. What does that mean? Well, it means that now you can spin up a very, very quick landing page that you can link to a domain name, that you can link to your own account on AWeber. So if you want to give something away, if you want to give people a teaser for a new podcast that is coming out, then all you need to do is create your sign-up form using AWeber and launch one of their very simple, very well-designed landing pages. So please go and check that out. It's just a wondrous feature, and I think it's something that many people will use very, very quickly. So please, don't be left behind. Keep building that email list. Keep building the relationships. Go and check AWeber out for these new features at markasquith.com/AWeber. Now, for those of you that might not know, Podfest Multimedia Expo takes place every single February or March, late February, early March, in Orlando, Florida. It's run by one of my friends, Mr. Chris Kramitsos, and his wonderful wife, Katie, and it's just a real community atmosphere. So it's one of those events that, you know, you're never going to be overwhelmed by the industry. You're never going to be overwhelmed by the brands. You're never going to kind of see the big money coming in and taking over, which, you know, podcasting is going through a growth spurt at the minute. Podcasting is going through that phase right now where a lot of places, a lot of podcast experiences can sometimes feel a little bit too corporate. And I think the two main conferences for me in the space, Podcast Movement and Podfest Multimedia Expo, really balance that out kind of nicely. I think it works. The way that the two pitch each other, I think it just works very, very well. So Podfest it's just fun. It's one of those places where, of course, you can learn. And it's just one of the places that I really enjoy coming. Now, I was joined by, I think, around 1,100. I spoke to the registration attendants on the desks, and they told me that around 1,100 people had shown up this year for Podfest, which is wonderful. You know, the growth year on year just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm really honored to be a part of this. So here at Rebel-Based Media, of course, we brought our Captivate platform, Captivate.fm, the world's only growth-oriented podcast hosting platform. We were in full force. There were other podcast hosts there as well. And the first thing that really struck me about Podfest was that it really feels like the hosting companies are getting along. You know, we were out with, we went for dinner with a competitor. We went out there with the Buzzsprout guys. We having a laugh with them. We were getting along with them. Everything's really, really close. We're very, very close to the other companies in the space. Some of the older companies perhaps pull away from that a little bit. And that was really, really interesting to me to see that the space, it's evolving in so many different places. You know, industry money coming in, the podcast awards coming in, all of these other things that are now making podcasting so very different than it has been. It's always very interesting to me to see quote-unquote competitors actually getting along and having some fun, sharing ideas, collaborating. And, it, you know, that's the spirit of the industry, always has been. And I think it would be great for some of the older companies to get involved. That was my first takeaway from Podfest. I think it's fantastic that the newer guys can do this, and I think it's fantastic that some of the older guard, you know, maybe should be looking at getting involved. I think that's a really strong opportunity just to make the industry overall progress. So the event itself was very, very busy. It was a shame that some of the rooms got a little too busy. My room, I spoke on Sunday morning about the podcast discoverability triangle, building genuine listeners using my listener acquisition flow concept. And it was packed. I mean, it was standing room only from 15 minutes prior to the session. And then after that, people were lining up outside and listening from outside. It's a shame that the rooms were maybe slightly smaller than the speakers would have liked. I understand that's a very difficult thing to balance, and finding a venue is not easy. So that's certainly not a negative. It's certainly not a criticism. If anything, it's a positive because, of course, the show seems to be growing and growing and growing. And it's really testament to the industry, But there's one thing that we need to talk about, because although Podfest was very, very positive, it was very, very creator focused, there is something that we need to talk about, which is podcasters and money. We need to talk about this in some more depth. I'm not going to do this as a deep dive on this episode, but what we need to think about here is that so many podcasters now are seeing what's going on in the upper echelons of podcasting. We're seeing people like Wondery, strike deals that are very, very, very cash focused. We're seeing a lot of VC money entering the space when it comes through to technology companies. We're seeing Spotify maybe or maybe not putting up a bit of a walled garden. Are they trying to turn this into YouTube? And that's scaring independent podcasters. And that was never, ever more evident than here at Podfest, where so many people who had not even launched their show were asking about dynamic ad insertion. They were asking about how to monetize from day one. And I believe you can do that if you've got the right audience and creator support. But the fact that people were coming in now and asking about dynamic ad insertion is just, it's just crazy. It is just crazy. This is a very creator-led conference. It's a very creator-led media. It's a very creator-led industry. But it's growing up. It is turning into the industry. It's turning into a $1 billion industry through ad revenue. It needs to go to be a $3, a $5, a $10 billion industry. And we understand that it can't do that without more ad revenue. But in this, honestly, you don't have to copy what's going on. You don't have to worry about what's going on in the different areas of podcasting. Just keep creating, build yourself as a marketer. Look at outsourcing your development of marketing. If you can't do that, and you never will do that. So we need to talk about that. We've got to dive into that in more of a deep dive, which I'm going to do on the show, of course. But that was a big concern that I have. That was a big concern that I have. One of the other concerns that I have, and this frustrates the hell out of me, space invaders, that's what I'm going to call them. People entering the space selling absolute bullshit. Sam told me a story about a marketer coming up to the exhibit booth at Rebel Base Media, taking one of the 500 T-shirts that we gave away. If you've not got one, I do apologise, but they went really quickly and they're amazing T-shirts. You maybe get one at Podcast Movement when we do our new one. But we had a marketer come up to the booth at Podfest and say to us, obviously we ask what each and every person does, we want to get into their story. This person said, well, I'm a marketer, I'm writing a book on how to market your podcast. So I'm here really to learn about podcasting because I don't have a podcast, I've got no experience in podcasting, but I'm going to write a book teaching people how to grow their podcast. And that just shocked me. Like, what a pile of crap. Like, that is going to be principally fine. There will be high-level strategies from a marketer. I'm sure this marketer has a great pedigree in marketing, but how insulting to understand or to pretend to understand the industry just because they've seen money flowing through it. It is frankly exploitative, and I think it's the wrong thing to do. And if you buy that book, I urge you to leave, just leave that book with pragmatism in mind, really consider how much experience any given person is giving you in podcasting. I don't profess to be the expert in podcasting. I'm just that British podcast guy. I work in podcasting, but I never profess to. That's why I don't do coaching. I don't believe that I have the right to take your money, okay, for coaching you and for giving you education. I should be giving you this for free, okay? Now, having said that, marketing is marketing. You know, you need someone that's got a proven track record. But what I don't like about this is that someone is entering the space and being very, very naughty about it, saying, I will help podcasters to grow, when they have no experience helping podcasters to grow. If they had, fine. Maybe they've got pedigree helping other marketing, other companies with their marketing, but is financial, is legal, is B2B, B2C. Is that all the same? Is FMCG the same as podcasting? No, of course it's not. Is YouTube the same as podcasting? No, of course it's not. I just think it's wrong. I think it's crap. I think it's exploitative. I think it's naughty. And I think anyone that has paid to attend a conference just to learn how to write a book to make money from people at that conference should be called out. Unless you live, breathe, and have experience in something, you do not have the right to claim to be an expert just because you want to make money from it. It's wrong. I really don't like it. That's my rant over. It's a doozy of a story, but I was legitimately shocked by this, okay? It took me aback. So, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. Maybe I'm getting old. Maybe I'm turning into one of the ranting people that you see on stage at these conferences, ranting about things and fear-mongering. I will never be one of those people. Don't worry about it. I will always give it you straight. So I don't know. Like I said, maybe I'm just ranting about that. But I found it really wrong. I don't know. Like I said, I'm just kind of venting a bit there. But Podfest overall has been great. The other thing that you will notice is my voice is dying. I'm sounding like a 15-year-old with my voice breaking for the first time. And one of the key takeaways that I will give you, though, the third thing that I want to talk about, you know, the Podfest overall was a great event. I really, really enjoyed it. Put your audience first, all right? The second your audience becomes an audience, the second your audio touches the ears of one person, 2 people, 3, 4, 5, 10, 100, 1,000 people, that podcast stops being just yours. I've talked about this before. The key stakeholders in your podcast are you and your audience, okay? And there are more of them, okay? So you've got to put your audience first, consistently learn from what they want. And if you do that, you will be a successful creator. And that was one of the things most on show at Podfest. So a big shout out to everyone that attended. Thank you so much for taking all the 500 t-shirts. Thank you for the exceptionally kind words about Captivate.fm. Thank you to all the people that signed up on the spot and moved from some of the other hosts or were creating their shows for the very, very first time using Captivate. Thank you so much to everyone that supported us. We got some great behind-the-scenes content from Podfest that we're going to be putting out on YouTube and, of course, our Instagram profile over at Rebel Base Media. So, hopefully, see you next year. If you didn't attend, like I said, I will hopefully see you next year. So, thank you to Chris, Katie, all of the rest of the team that are involved in Podfest 2020, and we absolutely will see you in 2021. Until the next time, thank you for joining me, and never forget, the more you expect from yourself, the more you will excel.